All right, everybody, welcome back to the Boardman Black and Gold podcast with Zane and David. Last time we discussed the quarterback situation and what we think should have happened or what should happen, I guess, this upcoming offseason in regards to Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, the draft, maybe some free agents. So if you haven't gone and listened to that episode, go and check that out. It is the episode previous to this one, but this time around, we have to talk about the running backs, because even in our little preparation before recording this, I think we're starting to realize that the situation is a little bit more dire than we were originally thinking. Najee Harris is a unrestricted free agent, so we knew that. We knew that we didn't pick up his fifth-year option. But the one thing that I didn't know, David, was that Jaylen Warren is a restricted free agent. That kind of shocked me, and I was not really ready for that. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that he won't be back, but there is a small possibility of that happening. So I guess maybe get your thoughts on that whole thing, because that kind of surprised me a little bit.
Well, so I didn't know that either. So kind of hearing that, I also was like, oh well, now that adds a wrinkle, something else we have to take into consideration before I even knew that about Jaylen Warren. My thoughts on Najee were I'm neutral. I think like if we sign him to another deal, like I don't know how many years, 3 or 4 maybe, which would probably be like the most realistic. I think okay, like fine, like that works. Um, I wouldn't be majorly disappointed. I do think that Najee is a consistent guy. Like I think he, fits the Steelers as being average right in the middle. So I don't mind that. However, I am totally fine with letting him walk and retaining whatever money we would have to give to get him back. And then I honestly think it would be pretty cheap for Jaylen Warren. I don't think he's going to be a lot of money, which would be nice. So we could save money by letting Najee walk. And I know you mentioned you have some draft prospects, some trade prospects, or some free agent prospects. And I honestly, from what I've seen and heard, I feel like the running back room with this draft is pretty deep. So I think there are odds that we could get a good guy to sample in with Warren. And, obviously he'd be on a rookie contract. So it wouldn't be, because we know that running backs want so much money now, it wouldn't be whatever Najee would be requesting.
That's a good point. Now, I guess the first thing that I want to kind of pose is, do you think that the scheme with Najee is effective moving forward? Do you think what we've done with Najee in I guess, the recent past, do you think that's like the key moving forward? Because I'm looking at these guys and I'm seeing a lot of Najee similar running backs. I'm seeing a lot of like bigger guys that are kind of like bowl you over, when it seems like the most effective our running game has been with Jaylen Warren, when he's more shifty, he can move quicker, he's involved in the passing game. I guess, like, what are your thoughts on that? Because I'm kind of on the fence as far as my own opinion.
I think off of my first instinct, it would be nice to get a little bit of a different approach. I think just because we've seen what Jalen Warren does, we're like, he gets the ball, and even if there's someone right in his face, he runs so fast into him, he gets at least like 3 or 4 yards. And I think with Najee, it's like yeah, Najee's a big guy and he can be physical, but he is just so slow. It's like he's got bricks in his shoes. And so there's always someone there. And I mean his average yards per run. I remember the first couple of years it was garbage. I don't know what it's been now. I think it's got I mean, it has to be for sure under 5 and probably maybe 4. But so I think that like we need some of that like zip, like getting people in there because our O line right now. I'm not gonna say like our O line isn't what it was like 2 years ago when it was in shambles. It's still not great, but I think that like we've seen with speed that Jalen Warren can find that hole and go, and our O line can block it just that long enough. I don't know if they can block well for a guy who like you can't let a Le'Veon Bell with this O line. Like there's no hesitation with this O line. They're gonna give you a hole and you got to take it, and then that's it. You can't pause. So I would love another guy like Warren, maybe a little bigger, but still with some decent speed to hit those gaps quicker.
Okay, so you talked about yards per carry, and you were thinking that it was probably under 5. Would it shock you if I told you that Najee's yards per carry in his entire career as a Steeler is 3.9?
I honestly was thinking I was trying to be generous because I was like 3 sounds crazy. So I was like maybe 4 or something, but that does not surprise me at all. I think that like for every 15 to 20 yard run he gets, there is 5 uh 3 yard 3 yards or -2 yard runs. So I think I mean that adds up perfectly in my mind.
So here's the problem. His projected market value is around 8 or 9 million a year for what he could get in free agency. Now, I'm looking at the list of some free agents this season, and I see guys like Aaron Jones, Javonte Williams, J.K. Dobbins, and A.J. Dillon, none of which will demand much more than $6 million a year. Now, I'll ask you this: how much different are, again, Aaron Jones, Javonte Williams, J.K. Dobbins, A.J. Dillon, that they would demand, or that Najee would demand $3 million more dollars a year annual value than those 4 guys?
I'm telling you, like right now, like after you drop those 4 names, I would take 3 of those guys over Najee Harris, like right now, like if I could make the call. And I think that part of that is because 2 of those guys that I'm thinking of, Aaron Jones and I guess not as much J.K. Dobbins or A.J. Dillon, but Aaron Jones specifically. I would love it if we could utilize our running backs a little bit more in the pass game. I feel like Najee Harris was never known for his hands, and he just takes too long to get going for anything to happen. And Aaron Jones, we know, is a dual weapon, a dual threat. But I will say I love J.K. Dobbins. I know he's had a bit of an injury, like stretch, but this last season was really good. I think he's a really powerful runner with speed, and the same thing goes for A.J. Dillon, if not more so. I don't really know what he did this year. I don't. Who was he with this year?
Dillon, I think he was with the Packers, I think.
Still with the Packers? Okay. Oh, so he was just behind Josh Jacobs, but I think that Dillon could be a better supplement to Warren than Najee would be because I think Dillon's faster than Najee and he's bigger than Najee. And I think he's more powerful too. Like, obviously Najee made great plays, but I just like he I can't remember the last time he's genuinely just bowled someone over and stayed up. Like he's had some stiff arms, yeah. He's thrown some people off him, but that's when they're coming at him high. Like when people go low, I feel like I don't see him like making a lot happen. But AJ Dillon, I mean, his leg could like knock a guy out. Like he's like huge. So those 3 guys specifically pique my interest. Javonte Williams, not at all. I wouldn't touch him. He hasn't really done anything since his rookie year. So, but those 3 guys, especially if they're $3 million less, I would be, even though all of them are getting up there in age, I would look into them.
So the thing about Dillon, though, is yes, he's huge, but he's like just as tall as Jalen Warren, if that makes sense. Yes, he's a bowling ball, but like as far as just in like overall size goes, I'm pretty sure Najee's bigger because Najee's like 6'4", 240. Dylan's probably 220, but like I don't know if he's 6 foot or not. I can't imagine he's much more over 6 foot. So I guess like my thought is with Jalen Warren being 5'8", 5'9", more shifty, yes, but I guess like how different would it really be with Najee and with Dillon? And then I guess like what you said about Aaron Jones, about his ability to be used in the passing game, I thought was really good. And I agree with that. I think that we've gone away from using our running backs in the passing game. Warren was kind of our option to do that these last couple of years. But the thing about Najee was he had almost 500 receiving yards his rookie year. And then his most receiving yards since then was this year, if that gives you any idea of like how that is, which I mean, I don't think it was much more than 250 receiving yards that he had this year. So he eclipsed that by over 200 yards, almost doubled that his rookie year, and then we never saw that again in the next 3 years. So again, it's kind of my thought where I'm going back to, is the scheming the problem for our running backs, or is it the running backs themselves? Because again, I think we've seen the unlocked potential of a guy like Najee Harris or a guy like Jaylen Warren. But again, is it really their fault that they haven't been utilized this much? Or is it the coaching that we've talked about so often with this, that they're not using their players how they should?
Right. I completely kind of agree with that. Where I like going right back to scheme. Like I think that's what it is that it's scheme over players, and that's the issue. Is just like why isn't Najee getting as many receiving yards? Well, he's not being targeted. They're targeted. He's not being utilized in the run game. Like, neither guy is being utilized to the best of their capabilities in our run game, and I think that just would that be fixed with a new guy coming in? Probably not if they use them the same way they used these two guys. And I would, that's the thing, is like, I wouldn't be surprised. We see this a lot, but I wouldn't be surprised if Najee goes and signs somewhere else. I wouldn't be surprised with him to go and have his best year. Like if he signs with a relatively decent team, I wouldn't be surprised because he's an athlete. He can play. He gets 1,000-yard rushing seasons, even though it's not as impressive anymore. But he gets it with, like what we said, a scheme that is kind of overshadowing and hiding all of his abilities. And, the fact that he's still able to do that, still able to make some plays, I think he could do something big somewhere else. And to your point, I don't know if adding one of those four guys would fix it, would fix that.
So, okay. Here's the other thing I wanted to bring up about Najee is I think his reliability is definitely an asset that I think sometimes gets underrated. He only has 5 fumbles in over almost 1,100 carries in his NFL career. And that's not even accounting for any times he touched the ball in the receiving game. So 5 fumbles. And then Warren, to just kind of compare, he has 7 fumbles in his just 3 years of play with the Steelers. And again, when you compare how much Warren is used in relation to Najee, that's a pretty substantial difference. Now, I don't know much about the reliability of these other guys, but the other thing about Najee is that he has not missed a game in his entire Steelers tenure. Like, he has played every single game from the time that he started with the Steelers as a rookie all the way up until this last playoff game. So how much, I guess, do you value the reliability that Najee brings, and would going out and getting one of these other free agent running backs that are a little bit older, yes, how much would that play into your decision-making process here?
Well, I think that's a good point. I think that you know, jumping too quick with the free agents, it kind of does think like, oh, the grass is always greener because we've seen Najee for 4 years and we've seen the same thing. But to your point, there are a lot of things that are good, like no injuries, no fumbles. He tends to get the same amount of yards every single year, like almost to the number, the same amount of yards every single year. Same with touchdowns. And so yeah, I think that I would love to see those numbers go up. But like I said, like if we were to sign him, like if I were to see the notification or see you text about it, I'd be like, cool. Like I'm glad. Like I'd be happy. I do like I think Najee's a great guy off the field. Like I love Najee and I have a jersey, so of course I'd love him to be a Steeler. So yeah, I think I would be perfectly content. I wouldn't just be content. I'd be happy if we signed him again. I think that I may be playing a little bit of devil's advocate, just trying to see like, oh, would these other options be better? Kind of diving into those. But like, I would be perfectly happy if we were to sign him again because, again, yeah, and like what we were just saying, if I don't know if the Steelers know how to do this, but if we change our scheme, he could be so much better than he already is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that might have to be a bigger part of this decision than maybe like the black and white nature of it is seeming to be. I think that truly, because again, if you think about this, we are still living in the 1950s with our offense. It is just run, 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 run. And, it's nice when you have a duo back like Najee and Warren, but I think that they could be so much better even if the scheme was not just run, 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 run all the time. And again, it seems like now Arthur Smith is kind of under fire. It doesn't look like he's going to get I don't think he's going to get a head coaching job because pretty much all of those have been taken up at this point. But if he comes back and it's like, how much am I going to trust him with an Aaron Jones? Like, and that might be even worse because you get a guy like Aaron Jones who is lethal in the passing game, but you're trying to just shove him into the running game with the extent that Najee has been used over the last couple of years. He might even end up being worse than what Najee has put out. So, like it's a point to where I think I'm almost really convincing myself that the scheme is the biggest problem with the running backs. And from there, it just kind of makes me even more concerned that if we do bring in somebody else, then it might be even worse. Because I think we have rightfully complained about the running game this year. I think it was, especially early on this season, it was just not very good. And then I think in that middle stretch of the season where we were winning games, that was when the running game was really doing well. And that was when the transition period between Justin Fields and Russell Wilson was happening. And then what it seems like it's come out this week that when the Steelers started losing, it was because Arthur Smith was not allowing Russell Wilson to, run the offense the way he wanted to. It was Arthur Smith putting down his fist and saying, no, you're going to do this. And what I say goes. And the offense sputtered and died in the last 5 games of the season. And it seems like that was the biggest problem of it. And again, if we get back to that middle chunk of the season where both Najee and Warren were having really nice games up over around 5 yards a carry, then this might change the entire complexion of this decision. So I don't know. I'm kind of in between. I don't know what I like, and I don't necessarily know what I don't like either, because it's not as black and white as our quarterback situation. Wouldn't you say? We were pretty decisive on what we thought for the quarterbacks, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think this one's harder because, again, like you said, this isn't necessarily about the player. It's more about the scheme.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's look into the draft a little bit because, like you said earlier, this is a pretty deep running back draft. Obviously, the highlight is Ashton Genty, which I can't imagine he would drop down to 21. And if he does, then I'm smashing that button, right? Are you doing that? Okay, good.
You can't pass up on him.
Yeah, I would think so. Now, there's a couple of guys that I'm sure you're very familiar with. Travion Henderson and Quinshawn Judkins, excuse me.
Judkins.
Yes. So you're 2 OSU guys. What do you you're the OSU expert. Kind of talk to me about what they project as far as what they can do in the NFL.
So I don't think Henderson would work with us because I think Henderson is a taller, leaner, a little better version of Jalen Warren. So it's like we're going to have that. Now, with Keyshawn Junkins, he could be interesting. I don't know. He honestly, I don't know if I don't think he's as tall as Najee, but I think he plays the same kind of game. And he's definitely faster. He's definitely got more speed, but he's definitely like I will take it up the middle. I will run into guys. I will, get those hard, gritty runs. But he also, I think, what he can do better than Najee is bounce it outside and hit that speed and, go for a while. And he had some long runs this year that were really pretty. So I think that, I don't know, could just be the fresh legs, but I do think that he plays similarly to Najee, but has that outside burst that Najee just doesn't quite have.
That's a great point. And I think that was one of the biggest weaknesses in our game was the lateral movement with Najee specifically. I think Jalen Warren was much better at that. But again, it goes back to the scheme. why are we running these outside pitches to Najee Harris when he doesn't have that lateral quickness that, a lot of these other guys have? Which, again, if Arthur Smith does come back and he is incensed on just continuing to run those types of plays, then yes, that would be an upgrade over Najee Harris, I would think, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's interesting. I wonder when he's calling those plays, does he think that Najee is just like another Derrick Henry? Because Najee's a good player, but he's not Derrick Henry. Like, you could run it up the gut with Derrick Henry, you could pitch it outside with Derrick Henry, and both are going to work. That's not how it works. I don't know if he thinks like it's as simple as it was when he was in Tennessee, but that's just not how like that's going to work. But with Judkins, I do think you could get that where he could definitely do both and do both well.
Okay. So there's two other guys that I've thought about as well. One of them is Ollie Gordon Jr. from Oklahoma State. And what I've seen a lot about him is that he's pretty much just Najee 2.0. He's a big guy, he's going to bowl you over, and he kind of profiles the same as Najee. Now, what in your mind, is it worth it to draft high for just a Najee 2.0?
I think in that case, no. I say you just if that's who you would pick, I would say don't do that. Sign Najee and use that first round pick on something that we like really need more that we can't go out and get at the current moment. Because Najee's still in his prime. So like if you're just gonna get another Najee, I don't really see the point in that because we know what we're gonna get, and what we get is consistent, so we don't need to change it if all we're doing is trying to do the same thing.
Okay, fair enough. And then the last one that I saw, which is kind of a wild card, Cam Scatabo from Arizona State, who had you were waiting for me to say him, weren't you?
I was waiting for him, and then I think he's a senior, the Texas running back, the blue guy, Jaden Blue.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if he's a senior. He might not be a senior,
Okay.
but I do like. I don't know how he would work with us. He's just fun to watch. But Scadaboo is interesting for sure.
So obviously he had the huge. What was it? Was that the was it the quarterfinal? Yeah, it was quarterfinal round against. Who was that against?
It was good stuff.
Oh, you're right. It was against Texas. That was a pretty incredible game, and I am really upset that Arizona State didn't win that game. But
Yeah.
Scatabo, he literally put the team on his back, and that was kind of an eye popping performance that really got me like it got the wheels churning in my head. I'm like, ooh, like is that something that I want? Because it just it's intriguing to me. I don't know if it's necessarily like the best idea, but that game specifically really kind of got my eyes wide and I'm like, that's interesting. And it doesn't look like he's projected to be super high. This could be a guy that you might could get in the second round. You might as where the Steelers are, they might have to trade up in the second round, but that might be kind of like a mid to early second round type of guy. And again, I'm trying to think of this, and I'll let you do this as well. But what other teams really need running backs right now? Because I know that like we definitely do, but we also need a myriad of other things, including wide receiver, which we're going to talk about in a different episode. We were originally going to talk about wide receivers and running backs in this episode, but we got to talking about running backs and we're like, okay, let's save wide receivers for another time because there's a whole lot of stuff going on. But how many other teams do you think need a running back right now that they'd willingly give up draft capital to draft one?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of like a crazy amount. I would say like the Cowboys, I think, are in need of a running back. Um, Honestly, if we look at our own division, I don't know how content the Bengals are with Chase Brown. I think that if they're not content with him, then they do. But if they like him, they're not really necessarily looking. And kind of same with the Browns. I think that I don't really know if they're content with the Jerome Ford Nick Chubb duo. So they could be, and they got a really low pick, but I don't think they're going to use it on a running back. Um, well then yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I can't think off the top of my head. Actually, the Buccaneers. I think the Buccaneers would really benefit from having a running back.
They have Bucky Irving though.
I don't, the games I've seen, he didn't seem like like a huge factor.
Hmm.
Where I was like, I don't know. For something there's something I didn't like about him.
Okay, fair
Sorry.
enough. Fair enough. I think maybe the Raiders might need a running back because they were like the worst rushing team in the NFL last season. I'm trying to think as well. I can't think of too many other ones. Because, I mean, even if you think about just like the free agents that I listed four. There might be a couple others, but like you think of like the Vikings, the Broncos, which he was their RB1, but they did kind of a two back set as well. Who was their other running back?
Uh,
Oh, wait, I had both of them in fantasy. What am I saying? Javonte Williams, and then who was the other one? Audric Estime, is that his name? He was like an RB3 though, I thought. There's one other guy. I can't think of who the other guy is with the Broncos. Anyways, it'll probably come to me and I'll just randomly spit it out later. But then J.K. Dobbins with the Chargers, and then he kind of did a little bit back and forth with who's the other one with the Chargers?
Gus,
Gus Edwards, yes. And then Dylan with the Packers. So here, like, there's not a lot of names that are like pending free agents. Again, Najee is one of them. And, maybe these guys just kind of flip sides and go every which way. But I mean, I think we're kind of on the right track in that, like, this draft might be deeper than we think. And maybe we could snag one of these guys, you know, second round. I can't imagine that all five of these guys would drop to the very end, because we have seen, like, you think about the Lions a couple years ago with Jahmyr Gibbs, they didn't necessarily need a running back, but they drafted one anyway. And it was like it was foresight on their part to go out and get a running back. And again, if these guys are super ultra talented, then, why wouldn't you go after these types of guys? But as far as the Steelers go, like, it's not priority number one necessarily, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's not priority number one. But again, like you said, like with the Lions, it's like, man, second round comes around and some of these guys are there. It's like, how could you pass up on them?
Yeah. And then you mentioned before we started about Cordarrelle Patterson. He's got 1 year left on his deal. He's going to have a $3 million cap hits. What do you see him doing moving forward? Is he going to be much of a factor, or is he kind of just going to be, dead weight?
I think he's just going to be dead weight. But the reason why, before we started, that I was wondering was because I was like, if he's a free agent, I was going to be like, let him go. Like, we don't need to worry about him. But he's with us. And like, I don't know, because I think that we are going, either we get Najee or we get a replacement for Najee. So I still think that Cordero Patterson has a minor role. However, I will say when you ran him up the gut or even up the side sometimes, like he was a little good at being supplemental, like coming in, at like a few times a game. And it's like he would make some decent runs. So it's like I wouldn't mind with him staying in a similar role. However, I don't want him in the pass game taking a wide receiver spot. Like a tight end, sure, maybe, but not a wide receiver spot. I don't really like his X factor ability there. I think he's a little too old for that role now. But I do like him at times being a supplemental running back, getting a few yards here and there.
Okay. I'm right there with you. I don't think he's much of an X factor, just like you said, but I don't mind him being on the team, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, now as we finish up here, let's just kind of go. If you want to start, say what you want. Like, what do you want the Steelers to do?
Honestly, I would love. I mean, obviously, sign Jalen Warren, and I mean, I'm an Ohio State guy. I'd love to see Krishan Junkins be with the Steelers. I think that would be good. Ideally, I do think that if our scheme doesn't change, I don't think Najee is going to get better, and I don't foresee our scheme changing. And so I would probably ideal situation is take someone like him and kind of keep Warren and go with that.
What would it take to get Judkins in your mind?
I don't know because you brought up the question is like how many people in front of us want a running back, and where is he on that? Because he's probably, I mean, like he's probably top five.
Yes,
But like,
I would say he's top 5. Yeah.
are there 5 teams in front of us that need a running back? Because I would say that you can guarantee that Ashton is going before him. And you could argue a case for either Henderson or Scattaboo to go in front of him also. And so I think like depending on how things shake out, he may fall to us. But in the case of where you're saying where we may have to trade up, I don't think that we should. I would rather if we can't get him with the pick that we have, I'd rather sign Najee.
Now, what pick is that? Is that our first round pick or is that the second round pick that you're talking about?
I wouldn't complain if they took him first round. I don't know if that would be what I would want them to attack primarily, but if they did take him, I wouldn't complain. And again, it's harder to think about that because it's like, well, will we have Najee by the time the draft comes around? Will we not have Najee? If we don't have Najee and we haven't signed anyone free agency, then I'm like, okay, take a running back. But like if we do sign Najee, that's like, well, don't. But yeah, I wouldn't be upset with a first round running back choice if we do decide to let Najee walk and not bring anyone in.
Okay. So, and then I guess the obvious question would be is, if they are around in the second round, then like you're all over that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
What are your thoughts?
I'm still just really conflicted as to what I really want. And I don't know if there's really a right answer. You seemed pretty decisive with what you said. I don't know. I think maybe, just maybe, Scattaboo is going to fall to the second round. I have a feeling that is a possibility. And if we go wide receiver in the first round and then Scattaboo in the second round, I think that would be a successful draft. I don't think that there are more pressing needs on our team right now than running back and wide receiver. We don't even have to talk about the tight ends because we have enough tight ends to feed a third world country in Africa. Like, we've got plenty. But like the huge holes on our team right now are, at least it's wide receiver first and foremost, and then running back is kind of just a question mark. But if that happens and we can get Scattaboo in the second round, I'm all over that. I would like that a lot. If we let Najee walk, like you said, that's kind of where I'm after. And here's one thing which it's kind of going to throw a wrench into everything we've said, but I would not necessarily be so upset if we went out and got Javonte Williams. I think that, I think that his profile, I think it works with what I want our scheme to be, not what our scheme is, but what I want our scheme to be. And he's also like, he just hasn't, like after he tore his ACL, he just hasn't been himself. We saw what he could be before he got injured. And maybe it's just this long kind of recovery process. And again, Denver was working with 2 setbacks for most of the season, even 3 at times, and I still can't figure out who the heck their second running back was. But regardless, I would not be upset if Javonte Williams was the option, which at market value, it seems like he would be the most expensive. But again, with the scheme that I want the Steelers to adapt to, I think he fits it better than what Najee is. And I think he would do just fine being with Jaylen Warren as the RB2 once again.
Yeah, that's interesting because I didn't have him on my radar at all because kind of like you said, he hasn't been himself since the torn ACL. Yeah, and if they made that choice, I think I would be nervous. I'd be worried. I don't know if I'd necessarily like it, but that is an interesting thought of like running it how you would, thinking he can fit that role. Because he's not bad by any means. We just haven't seen him have that spark that he did since that injury. But that's it. It's interesting thing.
Now, here one more thing before we wrap up, and this is kind of the huge theoretical question in all this: is it possible for Jaylen Warren to just be the RB1? Man, you're thinking about this.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, would you? Okay, answer me this question: would you compare not or Jaylen Warren to Chase Brown? Would you say that they're a little comparable?
I think they're comparable. I think that Jaylen Warren's better. And I know that nobody's going to believe me when I say that, but I think Warren's better than Chase Brown.
So then, to answer your question, yes, if I do, I think that he could definitely, if we use him. I mean, not even if we use him right, even when we were using him the way we were, he was going out there and getting yards, and he was. I don't really know. I guess he was a little banged up, kind of beginning of the year, but I think that he could fill the role. I would prefer two running backs just to try and keep a little bit more of the health, but I think that if they decided to go with that, I'd be excited about it.
So here's the other theoretical with this. Do you think that he is a beneficiary of being the second running back behind Najee with the workload, with the scheme, with how he is involved? Do you think that that is why he has been so effective? Or do you think he truly is just as good as he is advertised to be?
I think he truly is as good as advertised. I think that like a similar situation kind of happened with James Conner, where Le'Veon Bell was the guy for a year when James was there, and every time we put him in, he'd get like 15 yards, and it'd be like, oh, okay, cool. And then Le'Veon leaves, and Connor comes in, and before he gets hurt, he was tearing it up, and like he was having like 100 yards a game, and like doing all this stuff. And now we see he's doing great things with Arizona, and so I think that like a similar situation could happen with Jaylen Warren, where I feel like we've seen games where Warren has played a lot and hasn't gotten any worse, and like it seems like. I don't know, like when you see him breathing heavier, it looks like he might be even playing a little better. And so I think that he would love a chance to be a number one, and I think he would do well in it.
Yeah, I like a lot of that. And again, he's an undrafted guy. He's undersized. He kind of has something to prove. This could be an opportunity for him to say, hey, like, I'm an NFL running back. And, maybe you do go out and maybe you get one of the draft prospects that maybe isn't necessarily in our top five. Maybe you get somebody who's down a little bit, give him a shot kind of behind Jaylen Warren, or maybe you go out and you get a guy like AJ Dillon, who's been kind of an RB2 for most of his career. I think there's a lot of options that you could do if Warren is the number one guy. And on top of that, he would be super ultra cheap compared to the other options, which could help us as far as the cap space that we have to distribute to other positions. Again, cough, cough, namely running back. Or, excuse me, wide receiver. Excuse me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think that there are a lot of benefits to it. So, again, I wouldn't be opposed if they do that. I think there's a decent amount of choices. Like with our quarterback, I think like what you were saying, there's one choice that we both want, and the other choices will be fairly upset with if they make that. With this choice, I feel like they've got three, maybe four options where if they make that choice, I'll be content. So it'll be interesting to see which way they go.
Yeah, there's plenty of ways that they can approach this. And I think again, we can't kind of keep going back to the fact that the scheme has to get better if the production wants to get better. And I bet it has to happen. And if Arthur Smith is the guy next season, then I think what we saw this year is that the scheme with this set of guys just didn't quite pan out, and it wasn't as good as it needed to be for this team to be super competitive. But if you bring in a guy from the outside, you get a fresh take on things, or again, you make Warren the number one guy, then, you might see some substantial changes, from 2024 to 2025.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. And I look forward to see what their decision will be.
All right. Well, there is your running back situation on the Boardman Black and Gold podcast that is sponsored by Zecca Enterprises, crafting furniture solutions in northwestern Pennsylvania. You can call 910-777-3871 to turn your furniture problems into furniture solutions. So we got the running backs conversation taken care of, but now probably the biggest conversation is the wide receivers. What the heck are we going to do with the wide receivers? But we're not going to do that this episode. We're going to tease you, and we're going to do it next episode. So be sure to have your post notifications on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Actually, this week I did add the podcast feed to YouTube and to iHeartRadio. So there are two other options for you to listen to the Boardman Black and Gold podcast, whatever fits you best. We've kind of, with Apple Podcasts and Spotify, it's easier on your phone. But now, if you're a computer listener, if you listen to podcasts on your computer a lot, then this is a good option for you. So if you are unaware of our iHeartRadio or on the YouTube, go check it out, Boardman Black and Gold, and be sure to follow our Instagram accounts at Boardman and Gold. Oh, there's one other thing. We have a Twitter account now.
Yes, we do. I got the emails.
Yes, David's been getting all the confirmation emails that the email that he set up for this podcast. But we do have a Twitter account. It is, if you look up Boardman Black and Gold, it'll show up, but I got to find out what the actual @ is. But it's something along those lines. I believe I put it as BB and G podcast on Twitter. So we're going to have that as well. So keep an update on there. And the nice thing about Twitter is that you can engage in conversations with us. So if you have an opinion on this running back situation that you want to get out there, you want us to maybe address at some point, let us know. And, we can maybe talk about that. And also, again, if you are from these wide reaches of the earth listening to the Boardman Black and Gold podcast, whether you're from South Korea, Japan, Australia, wherever you're from, let us know. Send us a DM, send us a little ping on Twitter, and hey, just tell us that you're listening, and we'd love to talk to you and have a conversation with you. And hey, we want to continue to have these conversations with other Steelers fans, because hey, we talk about the Steelers a lot, just the two of us, but at the same time, we want you guys to be involved in the conversation too. So be sure to hit us up on those new socials.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with Twitter now, if you guys have something to say, you comment in it, we would definitely, bring it on to the podcast, talk about it, to see whatever angle that is. I think that would add a fun little extra texture to our podcast. But yeah, also make sure to tune in the next episode, because that's going to be a loaded and jam-packed one, because the wide receiver room, there's a lot of opinions going on there. So it'll be interesting to see that. It'll be a good episode.
A lot of opinions, a lot of rumors, a lot of stuff going on around the league. The Super Bowl hasn't even happened yet, but there are already people requesting trades and all this type of stuff. So again, be sure to go back and listen to our quarterback episode that we had previously. Thank you for listening to this one, and be sure to tune in to our wide receiver episode that'll be out probably in a couple of days. Not sure when we'll record that one, but you can be looking forward to that one on the Boardman Black and Gold podcast. And hey, Zane and David with our running back situation. Thanks for listening to this one. We'll see you next time.